Hi, everybody. A very pleasant evening to you. It's Steve Dolan here with Ramon Scott on Dolan's Dugout. Good to catch up with you. I know it's been a little while. Well, Moni, here we are. I guess we got a lot to talk about. We're going to start, obviously, by talking about who's going to be the next manager of the San Diego Padres. Now, I don't know, so you tell me.
Well, Steve, I've called this meeting. This is an emergency edition of Dolan's Dugout, right? We've kind of already had our season wrap up, and now we're mixed up in a little bit of drama. There's three sports radio stations in this town and only one professional team, so you can scan the dial and end up in a bunch of different places. But right now, I think everyone can agree that there are two major candidates for this job, maybe a third emerging, and a couple of outsiders. Some big news happened within the last 36 hours or so that maybe has put some handwriting on the wall as to which direction the Padres are going. I think, speaking from a fan perspective and what we've heard on the shows, if you will, and I'm talking about our friends, the major shows in town, right? We want Bruce Bochy, and you and I have talked about it already. Bruce is healthy, willing to come back, ready to get back in the game. Maybe there's a little bit of tug of war, a little bit with the way that Bochy, the three-time World Series winner, would like to handle a coaching staff as well as a ball club, more of a full hands-on approach, manager-only approach. While the Padres have maybe not quite done it that way over the last two renditions of the leadership. The number two man, maybe the hottest name right now from a national perspective, because we've seen the success of the Atlanta Braves. We know that Washington was once a candidate for this job here. He's openly opined, right, Steve, for probably this job. He still wants to manage in the big leagues. Yes, there's some talk about Washington's past. He had substance abuse issues. He's a 70-year-old man, and he's one of the hardest working guys. Players really love, respect, and admire the fact that he's also hands-on, getting out there every day with the club, participating in drills and everything that you really like to see in instruction and things like that. Couple of other names, Steve, that maybe people are not talking about as much. Rod Barajas, a little bit of experience in this organization, a lot of experience in this organization, and, knows a lot of people here. My hot name recently, I would think after what we saw within the last 36 hours, could Sandy Alomar Jr. Be the newest emerging candidate for the job. Other guys, just throw in maybe a couple more names. Phil Nevin and maybe Mark Loretta is still an outsider for this job. Maybe you have one or two more, but I can elaborate on those guys. That's a great list of names. And Steve, I don't want to go there, but you see what the Cardinals did. Mike Schilt maybe is also a candidate for this Padres job, but everyone has talked about the younger managers, and the Cardinals, one of the most respected organizations in baseball, have made the decision to go with a young manager. Could the Padres again go off the board, Steve?
I don't know. It hasn't worked the last two times with Andy Green and, of course, Jace Tingler. Now, Moni, it's funny going over some of the candidates. I know you've mentioned a lot of these guys. Obviously, on the top of a lot of people's lists is Bruce Bochy. The Padres kind of seem cool on Bruce, believe it or not. And I'm not so sure Bruce wants to come here because this team has become all about analytics. And Bruce Bochy's all about what his gut tells him. And I'm all for non-analytics. I'll give you a quick reason why. The Houston Astros in the World Series, Dusty Baker's that way. Game 5, against the Red Sox, Framber Valdez went 8 innings. Oh, no, analytics say don't go 8 innings. Don't go 8 innings. Next game, Luis Garcia goes 5 1/3. He was supposed to go 3. Analytics said don't do that. Don't do that. The Dusty Bakers, the Tony La Russos, with the White Sox come to the playoffs, the Bruce Bochys, they go by what they're seeing, not by what some computer tells them. And the Padres, I think, right now are too into the computer. So right now, for those who want Bochy, I don't think so. Going down the list, you mentioned Mike Schilt from the Cardinals. I'd be fine with him. But again, he left the Cardinals probably because he was too non-analytical. The Padres have interviewed Luis Rojas, who managed the New York Mets the last 2 years, and I'd say, no, don't go there. He didn't do that well there. But, then the list goes down. There's also mention of Brad Osmus, who used to catch for the Padres. He's managed a couple places in the big leagues. Mike Scioscia, who managed the Angels, although I think that with Scioscia that he's kind of like Bruce Bochy. He's too non-analytical, so I'm not sure if that works. You know what, Mooney? I'm going to throw a couple more names at you. And I would have no problem with either one of these guys. There's talk out there the Padres could be talking to some TV personalities. One of them could be Eduardo Perez with ESPN. Another could be Mark DeRosa with the MLB Network. And I'll tell you why I like the idea of somebody who's on TV going to become a manager. Because if you're managing, let's say the San Diego Padres, the other 29 teams aren't going to let you in on their secrets. If you're working for ESPN or the MLB Network, all 30 teams are going to confide in you what's going on. You can draw from what 30 teams have told you. It worked for Larry Durker with the Astros. I know it didn't work the 1 year Jerry Coleman was here with the Padres. I covered that team. It was a veteran team. It was like Animal House. That just wasn't going to work. But I really think, I don't know if they're on top of the list or anything, but if Mark DeRosa or Eduardo Perez were to come off TV and manage the Padres, hey, I think they'd have a better chance with either one of those two guys than they have for the last two guys they hired as their manager. That's kind of where I'm on my list. One other thing, too, the Padres, it sounds like Ruben Niebla, who's the assistant pitching coach for Cleveland. It sounds like the Padres have already hired him or almost have. And he's out of Calexico High, which is in, of course, here in San Diego Section CIF. Yay! But the only thing I think about that is the problem is if you start hiring coaches before the manager, a lot of managers are going to want to come in and hire their own coach. So I think, again, with the more veteran guys, that leaves them out. And going back to what you were talking about with Ron Washington and Buck Showalter, kind of think they're out of the picture. But anyway, I know I've kind of gone roundabout here, but again, I don't know. But I just think they're going to go for guys who are more analytics versus what their gut tells them. Heck, I saw Bruce Bochy one time change pitchers 6 times to 7 batters, and you can't do that now anymore, having to face 3 batters minimum. But again, the Bochis and the people in the world who go by what they see as opposed to what a computer tells them, I think they may be out of the running. But that's where I think they stand, though. We'll see what happens. I think probably when the World Series is over, they'll name a manager, because you're really not supposed to do that during the World Series unless it's on an off day.
Well, but we've seen, the Cardinals name their manager within the last 2 days, and I just think that Washington, the name for Washington, because of this delay. I mean, the manager was fired. There's been no movement yet. And while I do agree with you that a lot of times you do wait until after the World Series, that didn't stop the Cardinals. And of course, the Braves are still, playing. Hats off to them, too. It's going to be a great World Series. I think it might be a more interesting matchup than seeing that blue team in the World Series. And that's part of our problem, Steve, moving forward, manager notwithstanding, the two teams that are north of us and that gave us, well, I won't say directly so much trouble. We played pretty good against those two teams, but we're chasing them at this point. And if the target was really 2022 this whole time, the time is now, and the unraveling came amidst a whole mess of things that appear to be going on within the organization. Now, maybe they're not too forthcoming in what really evolved with, dismissing of a pitching coach down the stretch, the controversial remarks made by a national baseball writer and commentator that basically threw someone under the bus on the team. There could be speculation who that might have been, that said players no longer want to be here. Now, I think that comment may have been taken out of context, because really what it sounded like to me, but it just sounds better from a story perspective if it's some player that doesn't want to be here, albeit a young, high-priced player. a veteran player with a big contract or a player that maybe isn't living up to his expectations in his contract. But to me, it was more like the players don't want to be here right now because this season is over. We have blown it. That's why the team collapsed so vigorously down the stretch, really an all-time collapse in a city known for its big collapses. But somewhere down the line, when you have emotional people in positions, and I don't know, I'm starting to look at it from an ownership perspective, a front office perspective, and your very charismatic top stars. There was just some big chemistry problems, and that's going to be the biggest thing that they might have to fix, notwithstanding all the troubles on the field with finding positions, finding the right players for right positions. We know that there's still an abundance of talent, and the team could compete for a champion, for division titles and more, with chemistry and maybe shoring up some key positions with some free agents.
Yes, and Moni, another thing too, I think you have to look at the general manager's position. AJ Preller having been here, 7 years or so now, they have had one winning season, and that was in a 60-game season. Here's a question I'm going to ask. With 7 weeks left in the 2021 season, the Padres were 17 games over 500, and they finished under 500. So, going back to 2020, they were 14 games over 500 when the season ended, but in a regular season, they would have had 102 games to go. So my best guess is they were already out of pitching after 60 games last year. My best guess, if they played 162 last year, they may not have finished over 500 either, based on what happened this year with no pitching. So my question becomes, and I mean, a lot of people are asking this, you kind of have to look at the top. With A.J. Preller, I mean, as you know, at the trade deadline, they were willing to give the Texas Rangers almost $50 million to take Eric Hosmer. It would cost you maybe a little more than 10% of that for A.J. Preller to go away, even though he has 5 years left on his contract. And I think that's a legitimate question. What about Preller? They really haven't had a winning season with him in a full, 162-game season. Let's look at some of the things that have happened with Preller since, middle of last season. The trade deadline last year. Let me ask you something. From Seattle, you get Austin Nola. You give up Ty France, Luis Torrens. Not looking good. No, Cleveland. Yep. Ty France could be the first base. If he'd stayed, he could be the first baseman on this team. That could solve a lot of problems. I mean, with Cleveland, you never know about injuries, but Mike Clevenger may never, produce anything here. Cal Quantrill was as good a pitcher as there was in the American League the second half of last season. Padres traded him there. The three they traded for the trade deadline this year, Adam Frazier, it creates a logjam where every day you didn't know, was he in second base, left field, on the bench? Was Cronenworth at second? Was Cronenworth at first? What about Ha-Seong Kim? He was starting to develop, but he couldn't develop because he wasn't playing. Daniel Hudson for the bullpen, the second trade, didn't do anything. Jake Marisnik, why in the world they brought him here to sit the bench in the trade, I don't know. So I guess you could legitimately, I would love to see it, because I know I've seen in the newspaper where the writers, or the Athletic, the Union Tribune, whatever, where the writers have broken down a lot of things. I would like to see somebody break down every trade the Padres have made since the middle of last season and give it a grade A to F. And I don't think there's going to be too many A's in there. On the other end, maybe. And that's why I say, again, it would cost them, about a tenth of what it would cost to move Eric Hosmer, to move A.J. Preller for that price. And I think it's a legitimate question. Would that be the right thing to do? I would love to hear what other people have to say about that.
Well, I don't know if one can go from, genius to dunce overnight. I mean, a lot of people forget about some of the successes that, all of the successes that Preller had and the accolades that he received for some tremendous moves to get the Padres into a position that they were in, coming into maybe the interruption of the health crisis, and that threw all of us under the bus a little bit as far as, getting things back together. And I think things are starting to shape up, normal again. So this upcoming season will kind of be like a first full season in a way. Let's hope as we move along. But
That's right.
yeah, I mean, Preller's going to be the one on the hot seat moving forward, Steve. But you just, to me, I also have concerns with, maybe the way Mr. Seidler is, starting to do his business as well. But you don't want to fault anyone, for all the criticisms that we have. Most of the baseball financial reports will say that the Padres were pretty serious losers this year, and I don't wish that upon anybody, especially when, quite frankly, he said, hey, we're going to go out and still spend some money, which is nice. We'll see what kind of moves they really make or what kind of acquisitions they can make. But, there are some players currently under some contracts that, situations that they'd like to or need to change and get rid of to make things positive moving forward. And I think that's what some of the backlash was from players, maybe ones that were critical down the stretch, ones that didn't feel comfortable because they didn't hold up their end of the bargain really and kind of felt maybe ostracized by the rest of the team.
Yeah, I wonder too, because Moni, when we think about it, some of the players, you look at contracts. Tommy Pham's contract's up. I doubt that he comes back. You still got Will Myers another year at $20 million. You still got Eric Hosmer another 4 years. He's going to cost you 20 next year, and then 13 in the 3 years after that. He can opt out after next year. Ain't no way he's opting out because he would never make nearly what he's down to make with the Padres. So again, they've got those issues. And who knows? At some point, if they were willing to, send almost $50 million with Hosmer to send into Texas in a trade that didn't work out, who knows what they're going to do with him? I mean, again, next year they've got and look at some of the stuff too, like Ha-Sung Kim. They've got 3 more years at $7 million a year with him.
Very expensive player for no production so far.
Yeah, where's he going to fit in with Adam Frazier still here? And again, he wasn't able to develop this year. He's starting to do a little bit better, and then when Frazier came here, all of a sudden he wasn't playing. So what happens there? What happens to the pitching with Nelson Lamet? You keep bringing him back where you just don't know if or when or if he's ever going to be healthy. And I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot of things going on. It's really weird too because going into the season, remember the Padres were going to be the second best team in the National League after the Dodgers. And the Padres, what were people predicting? 94, 95 wins. They had 79, so they were like 15 under the prediction. They we'd have to figure it out, but they probably came in more games below what they were supposed to win than any team in Major League Baseball, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So
what a team like the Braves. I mean, granted, it's a great situation. They did a tremendous job, but it wasn't like they, had the great ball club, Steve. Those moves that they made, you talk about successful front offices. I mean, you can't rest on your laurels. The Braves were in a desperate situation with losing their entire outfield and having all those injury woes and really, not the top rotation certainly in the big leagues, but guys who really stepped up and look where they ended up. So that was the magic right there.
Yeah, look at their outfield. Rosario, Duvall, Jock Peterson, none of those guys were even there when the season started. Now they're carrying them in the playoffs. But Moni, there's one thing that it's not just a Padre thing; it's a baseball thing. The CBA, the contract, labor negotiation contract, that is, runs out December 1st. It looks like we're going to have the first work stoppage in 26 years. In that, as of December 1st, there will be no contract, and what that's going to mean is you're really not going to sign players if you don't know what the next contract's going to be like. If you were to ask what's the most likely scenario, don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if come mid-February and training camp's supposed to start, contract's still not solved. Because anytime there's negotiations, you never get them done on time. You wait till the last minute. I could see this dragging on to like mid-March, and then teams show up late for spring training, and maybe the season starts a week or two late, and you add a week or two on at the end. But then the issue becomes, if you're not signing players between December and let's say mid-March because the contracts run up, then all of a sudden in mid-March, there's going to be tons of players out there who haven't signed as free agents, so it's just going to go crazy. So I hope they get that labor negotiation settled, but Uh, if you want it for a Christmas present or a New Year's Eve, whatever, it ain't going to happen in 2021. They get that contract done. Let's just hope they get it done before spring training in 2022. But, again, I think the odds in Vegas of getting it done would probably be about what? Minus 300, saying they don't get it done. It just doesn't look good.
Well, there goes my prediction. A fresh restart for the season, but maybe maybe a little bit of a crapshoot is what the Padres need at this point because when they thought they had things organized heading into this season, obviously the optimism that we had and that everybody had, uh, you know, just unraveled over those last weeks. I mean, it was just a shame to watch, and then the finger pointing as well, and it just wasn't a good look. And it's easy to see why there's some people jumping off this bandwagon at this point because talk about not promising. I mean, for all the uh, talent on this roster, it's hard to get motivated about this team right now. It's hard to get excited moving forward when it looks like you have players that really aren't so sure. And I'm not talking about the labor situation. I'm talking about uh, they don't. It's not a confident group right now moving forward, despite the brave face that the two biggest stars of the franchise put forward to say that they didn't have any differences. And I don't put anything into that incident, but I just thought the spin that they had on it was not genuine.
I think the problem is that they waited 3 days to put him out there to the media. And I know, again, I'm no expert, but I did do media relations for 16 years at San Diego State. And one thing I was taught was to be proactive and to get ahead of the situation. And by letting it fester for 3 days before you put Tatis and Machado out there was just so much negativity in those 3 days because they hadn't spoken that by the time they spoke, it was almost too late. That could have been handled a whole lot better by getting in front of the situation. But be that as it may, I mean, now as we look forward to next season, another thing too, Moni, what about fans? I will say one thing, as you know, I mean, I did every game this year home and away for Bally Sports San Diego as their statistician. And one thing I know, every home game, we were down 35, 40,000 people, 40,000 people on a Monday for Oakland, which isn't usually a great draw. What about next year? Couple things. You have the bad ending this year. If the contract runs out and there's no labor agreement, season ticket prices have gone up 20%. It was great at the end of last year seeing 35, 40,000 people, but I think a big part of that is people have been cooped up for over a year during the pandemic. They just want to get out. But again, going into next year, this team's going to be a hard sell because of those factors I just talked about.
Yeah, I think that the more names can still attract, and I think that like I said, I mean, we got one professional team in this town, and I still think people can try to get behind it early and see what happens because they do have these marquee stars. Concerned about the decision making process of Fernando Tatis Jr. Not opting for the surgery, to me, now on the surface, just from a Joe Blow perspective, it just looks like he's a young man that might be just afraid to go under the knife. I mean, no one wants to have any kind of surgery, right? Especially one where if you're being told by medical people that, it's manageable, it is manageable, uh, you know, and it's manageable to where we've talked about it, Steve. If it happens again, you're going to be out for a couple of weeks. You can rehab, you can readjust your harness, you can strengthen it up with rest, weight training, and then get it back, and then start to ease it out again and get to throwing and get to swinging and all that. But why didn't you have the surgery? I mean, everyone, you know, I know the old saying, right? Bill Walton's old saying about it's only minor surgery if it's not on you. But for a procedure, that is pretty common among athletes, I don't know. I don't want to put anybody's words into the mouth when it comes to making a decision like that. But man, it just seems like a no brainer.
Yeah, and Moni, what's interesting about that too is with him not having the surgery, then certainly the question comes up, is he going to be out 4 or 5 times again next year because the shoulder pops
It,
out?
it
That's
would
the big
seem
question.
to me, Steve, on the surface, it would seem to me like yes, he will have some difficulty somewhere along the line, um, because that's the way that usually works. I mean, and I maybe I listened to the uh, Dr. Chow too much, but he's pretty much always right on. So these type of injuries continue to occur until you fix it.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Obviously, hey, I want to talk about something. This is going to be very, very unpopular, and probably 99% of people are going to disagree with me. When Tatis went to the outfield, so many people said, no, he's a shortstop, and he shouldn't be in the outfield and all. If you looked and watched every game this year and watched their shortstops, you would come to the conclusion that yes, Tatis makes some spectacular plays, but overall defensively, their best shortstop last year, and he can't hit a lick, was Ha-Sung Kim. Second best defensive shortstop was Jake Cronenworth. Third best defensive shortstop was Fernando Tatis Jr. And I'm just saying that in all honesty. I know that's not popular, but again, if you had somebody come from outer space who knew baseball but didn't know who these three guys were and was to see every game, I can guarantee you that's a conclusion they would draw by watching the way they all played shortstop.
Yeah, and it's not something that Tatis could improve with experience and repetition, but he's not the type of player that has groomed himself. He's done it. He's relied on his athletic ability to be the player that he is so far, and those spectacular plays where a harder working player. I don't say hard working. He's a very hard working player on his craft, but comparatively to say take the great shortstops out of San Pedro de Macorís, Steve, right? I mean, you learn the skills of shortstop by playing shortstop on terrible fields or something like that. Tatis has had a pretty good and quick upbringing into the major leagues. He's almost been too quick. I mean, look, how were we arguing just about within the last 2.5 years about, hey, are we bringing this guy up too soon? Are they going to hold him back to help his major league roster experience and wait to bring him up at a particular time in the season? But remember the Machado, they said, hey, he's ready now, bring him up now. He's been rushed. He's been rushed to the major leagues, but it's not like he's overmatched. I mean, he's obviously an elite talent.
No, I think he's certainly in the MVP conversation, which will be announced soon after the World Series. Do I think he's going to get it? Hope so, but in all honesty, don't think so. I think part of it was towards the end of the year, not just that he fell off a little bit, but the Padres fell off the cliff, and I think that's going to hurt him a lot. I mean, there's an argument out there for Bryce Harper. You could say the same thing about him. The Phillies didn't quite fall off a cliff like the Padres, but they didn't make the playoffs either. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you who I don't think is going to get the MVP either, but who I think I could have easily voted for, and that was Brandon Crawford. He was the best player on the best team in the National League. Where would the Giants have been without him this year? I mean, he just had a spectacular season. Maybe not a Tatis or Harper numbers, but to me, the bottom line's winning. And I mean, I think you can make a legitimate argument that Brandon Crawford should be the MVP in the National League. And maybe it's going to be Juan Soto with Washington, who got on base over 50% of the time, down the stretch. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a very close race. And again, would love to see Tatis win it. I don't think he will, but sure hope he does.
Yeah, and I've long moved away from the argument of it. Not to say that Crawford isn't deserving of it, and I always appreciate, good player on good team. But with baseball being such a team sport, I don't mind when if a guy's just having an overwhelmingly dominant season, which did not occur obviously this year. But I think that a most valuable player can be on a subpar team because,
of course,
it's such a team sport. But you can have off the charts numbers and imagine how good you might have been on a good team, or sometimes you end up being a contributor in ways because of your team play, and that's maybe what we need to see more of with this club. Well, Steve, we spent a half hour together. I don't know if you want to touch on anything else a little more, but I want to pin you down. This should be a great World Series and no reason why it shouldn't go 7 games. I know some people are thinking maybe 6 games, maybe, but Astros, we talk about the Braves injuries. Astros also key injury. Lance McCullers Jr., a major factor, but the Braves have had their injuries as well. And Steve, number one, have the Astros moved past the cheating controversy? And who do you like?
I'll tell you what, I think the Astros will never move past it completely, but I
Never.
like the Astros, believe it or not, in 5 or 6 games. I'll tell you why. Atlanta, everything has gone their way in the playoffs. Think about this. Of the 5 National League teams that made the playoffs, Atlanta had the worst record, and yet it hosted the National League Championship Series. It had the home field advantage. They don't have home field advantage in the World Series. I think Houston has more talent. I think Atlanta is just again, I think they were kind of like the Giants were all season. The Giants lived off magic all season, but it caught up with them against the Bears. I think Atlanta's lived off magic so far in the playoffs. But again, I think the home field advantage isn't anymore. I wouldn't be surprised. Again, I'm saying the Astros in 5 or 6. That's just my call. Your call?
No, I'll take the Braves. Opposite of you, I agree with you. The Astros, until generations pass, this group, unfortunately, especially when you look at the way we used to when we were kids, right, Steve? When we used to look at the results, from the 50s. You don't really know that much about history. Yes, there'll be more video history, but you'll really just look at agate words, right? When you see a little, you might see Houston, you might see Houston again, and you'll think right in that little era, there was some controversy. You might not even know and remember what year it was when they won those titles, but there is always going to be that, not an asterisk, but everyone will know that, something was up. And not to say it's not now. It looks like a pretty good ball club with a pretty respectable manager. The kind of manager I think Steve Dolan wants in the dugout.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because he's non-analytical. Dusty Baker is my type of guy, the guy that goes by what his gut tells him, not by what some computer tells him.
Well, he says,
appreciate everything. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
But as I say, I think we're pretty much have caught up. We're going to be coming back again soon. I'm going to be gone actually next week, but hopefully we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll look forward certainly to staying with everything during the off season. Hope they can get a labor agreement before December 1st, but don't bet more than a dime on that. But anyway, Ramon, I'll let you have the last word. I'm just glad we're connected again tonight.
Well, that's right, Steve. You talk about managers that have led teams to titles. I'll just leave you at this. Don't forget, you mentioned guys from television and media taking over from managers. You mentioned Jerry Coleman, and that was a magical time. And when he was managed, no one had any expectations, but you knew it'd be fun. But don't forget that the only manager to ever lead the Padres to the World Series title was Robert Guillaume, and of course his sidekick Gary Coleman, and they led the Padres to the World Series title over the White Sox in The Kid from Left Field. For Steve Dolan, I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.